In the complex and often contradictory investigation of JonBenet Ramsey's death, few pieces of evidence are as visually and functionally symbolic as the white cord found loosely tied around her right wrist. This cord, described in the autopsy and further analyzed in subsequent forensic reports, represents a potential intersection of forensic misdirection, behavioral staging, and amateur knot work. In a 1998 police interview, Patsy Ramsey remarked something to the effect of, quote, John had some, boat ropes and things up at the lake, but it seems like when they cut those, they kind of melt the ends of them or something to keep them from fraying or something. I've never seen one done like that, end quote. Meanwhile, John Ramsey claimed during his 2001 deposition, quote, I used to sail, but I'm not really familiar with knots. I should be, but I'm not, end quote. Some of the emphasis mine. These statements set the stage for a deeper look into the white cord, its construction, the knots employed, and the investigative implications of what might be considered a staged restraint. In this episode, we're going to do a little bit more forensic analysis on the right wrist ligature in the JonBenet Ramsey case. Before we get started, I'd like to send a huge shout out to CME. CME, thank you for the love and the support and continued engagement on the channel. Sending out a huge hug for you. Thank you so much and hope you enjoy this next video. So where to start? I was thinking about John Ramsey and the way that he described JonBenet as when he picked her up or when he saw her, he described it as a peaceful encounter, or she looked as if she was peaceful. And so, of course, I'm wondering what peaceful looks like. And so I pulled up this picture, kind of going through, and I'm wanting to keep it pretty close. But as you can see, this is her eye and this is her mouth. And so I was looking at some of these marks, and I was looking at this one here, and I was trying to figure out whether or not this had anything to do with maybe anything that was identified in the autopsy report, specifically with respect to this. Now, I've been wanting to go through the autopsy report for quite some time now. And so I was just looking at, the implications of this and trying to see if I couldn't put some puzzle pieces together and try to match this up. But while I was doing that, I started reading this, and I just basically went down the full report, just kind of making my highlights and my notes of things that I want to talk about at different points in time, maybe what's important to me, maybe things that I want to highlight and make a note of, especially with respect to the investigation that we're doing now. And so I just went through all of the pages and made my notes, or just highlighted and color coded some things to indicate what's important to me. And so I just thought I'd try to do a walkthrough succinctly and see what we come up with. And so that led me, I left off here very briefly, and so that led me to kind of look at the external exam with respect to the ligature on the right wrist. Now, the ligature on the right wrist has always been kind of interesting to me, just because when John Ramsey mentions it, he mentioned that it was hard to get off. It was so tight. He tried to undo the knot, and what have you. But the thing that interested me about that is that when you look at the knot and the rope that was tied around her hands, the rope is 15 feet or 15 inches apart. And so when you're thinking about somebody who's 3 feet 9 inches and they're 45 pounds, I mean, 15 inches is quite a ways apart. So JonBenet wouldn't have been straining. Furthermore, when we think about the cord that John was up against, it looks something like this, or this is the cord, as I understand it, that he was struggling with. And one of the main issues I have is that this, little part right here, it seems like you could just pull this out and you could kind of wiggle this free. So, however, John was trying to untie the knot just seemed interesting to me. And I didn't understand it because it didn't make a lot of sense. And so I did a little bit of a report just trying to, you know, see what we get. But, anyways, the report is based on this part right here. And so I'll read it. And this is the second page of the autopsy, um, the second paragraph. It says, the decedent is clothed in a long sleeved white knit collarless shirt, the mid interior chest area of which contains an embroidered silver star decorated with silver sequins, tied loosely around the right wrist. Overlying the sleeve of the shirt is a white cord. It goes on to say, at the knot, there is one tail end which measures 5.5 inches in length with a frayed end. The other tail of the knot measures 15.5 inches in length and the end in a double loop, in a double knot. This end of the cord is also frayed. It goes on to say there are no defects noted in the shirt, but the upper interior right sleeve contains a dried brown tan stain measuring 2.5 by 1.5 inches, consistent with the mucus from the nose of the mouth. And so I wanted to understand more about this, so I just kind of started doing some research, looking through everything. And so I'm going to walk through that research now. We can start by thinking about the cord structure and the material composition. The autopsy report describes the cord in a straightforward clinical manner, in straightforward clinical terms, tied loosely around the right wrist. Overlying the sleeve of the shirt is a white cord. Now, further forensic analysis provided by the Bodhi Technology Group identified the material as olefin, which is a polypropylene based synthetic, and stated that composed of a white colored cord, olefin, polypropylene, braided, similar in size and construction with the cord used in forming the garrote. This material is known for being light, inexpensive, and commonly found in household or craft settings rather than marine or industrial contexts. If we think about the knot or the rope itself, as we can see, it doesn't look too much like a heavy rope. It actually looks like a very small, light rope. It doesn't look like it's, army grade or anything. It just looks like a very simple rope or a simple cord of whatnot. So nothing too high class or important that we need to think about. So continuing with my research, it's very inexpensive, commonly found in households and craft settings rather than marine and industrial context. Both ends of the cord were frayed with no evidence of sealing. In practical rope work, fraying is typically avoided through burning, uh, whipping, or knotting the ends to prevent unraveling. The lack of these sealing techniques suggests a non-professional user, or it might suggest a non-professional user. It means that some of the things that you might do to um, some of the things that you might do to um, prepare the rope to sell make it look professional and professional grade. These things were not done to the rope. The rope just looked like um, you buy it, you mess it up, you keep it around the house to use it for various things, is what the rope looked like. So very non-professional. When I say that, you mean you're not going to be using it for anything legitimate. Now, you might use it if you're a painter. You might use it to maybe tie some things together or carry some stuff or what have you, or to jimmy rig some stuff or what have you. But when you really want to use a good rope, you're probably going to go buy a new rope that's professional, that's quality grade, and that has some sort of rating, right? And so this rope was not that. So it kind of tells you a little bit about the user or the person who leveraged this rope. This person may have been an individual who doesn't necessarily have access to something professional grade, or somebody who maybe doesn't have the wherewithal to know that they need something professional grade, or somebody who just doesn't care about professional grade. Maybe somebody is not necessarily in a rush, but it's what's available. They're using resources that are available. So this is something that somebody might use and say, you know what, this is what's available to me. I think it's great. We'll go with this. And so you can tell this person either doesn't have the means of buying something that's quality to do their intruder business, or, you know, they they don't need to care because they don't have a responsibility to care, because there is no plan on using it in a way that requires them to need a rope of that caliber. And I'd also like to go back to the rope for just a second, because again, this rope is very small in terms of width. Um, it's flat. This rope, when you think about the damage that it did to JonBenet, this rope would, of course, pierce the skin immediately. It would pierce the skin immediately. It could do damage rather quickly because of the flatness or the build of this rope or this cord. It could do damage rather quickly because it could get tighter and tighter, almost what one might say by accident. It might, because you can't really feel it setting in until it's kind of too late, right? You can't really feel it setting in until it's kind of too late, is the concern here. And of another concern is the knot tied here. And if you notice, these two knots are kind of different. This is more of a slip knot where you can just pull out what it looks like. You can just kind of pull this out and that comes free. So whoever is tied up, whatever wrist is tied up with this, you can just pull that out and it goes free. Or if you can't pull it out this way, you can pull it out this way. If you can't pull it out this way, it looks like you can just take this part and pull it out this way, and then this part on top unravels and you should be good to go. Now, this construction looks like it's a little bit different. This one looks like it's a little bit more permanent. And so you might have to break apart or deconstruct, what have you. And so that's the smallness of the rope. Um, Thinking about the psychology of this individual and how small this rope is. If I'm an intruder and I am coming in to perform an inappropriate action, I would think that I would use a rope that I would have control of, a rope that cannot evade my control. Because of the size of this rope, when you go to, if you are that kind of um, individual who performs inappropriate acts, then you probably want a rope that, as they say, you can tighten and loosen, you can tighten and loosen with more control. You don't want a rope that's going to uh, slip into the individual's um, body, is not going to kind of tighten up around their body without them being able to uh, without you being able to understand just how tight it is, because then you start getting into, hey, this was an accident, but this is a preventable accident, is a thing. So you could have prevented this. This was not something that had to happen. And so moving forward, it's kind of telling you something a little bit about the psychology of this person, in that it's almost as if this intruder doesn't take pride in the kind of work they do. Just seems like they don't really take pride in the kind of work they do. They just do anything, they just throw anything together. They show up to crime scenes to commit these violent acts, but they don't really plan anything. They just kind of go with the flow. Whatever's there, whatever's possible to use, they just go with the flow. And it's really kind of shoddy work. Whoever is doing this doesn't have a problem with shoddy work, and they actually may think that the shoddy work is actually some of their best work. And so you have to wonder, who would that be that would think that shoddy work would actually be pretty good? And so, like I said before, both ends of the cord are frayed with no evidence of sealing. And so they're just kind of hanging out there. It's a useless piece of rope. So, in practical rope work, fraying is typically avoided through burning, whipping, and knotting the ends to prevent unraveling. So the lack of these sealing techniques suggests a non-professional user. According to the autopsy, one tail of the knot measured 5.5 inches, the other 15.5 inches. Details corroborated by the crime scene photograph and matching the forensic descriptions. The visible unraveling of the cord in the crime scene images aligns precisely with Patsy Ramsey's statement that she had never seen ends like that done like that. So, in a 1998 interview, Patsy says, I don't recognize it. Specifically, Patsy's telling detectives in the interview as she examined a photo of the rope. She says, I've just never seen ends like that, done like that. John had some, boat ropes and things up at the lake, but it seems like when they cut those, they kind of melt the ends of them, or something to keep them from fraying. I've never seen one done like that. John goes on to say, John Ramsey didn't describe the cord in the misattributed terms previously quoted. However, in a 1998 interview with Detective Lou Smith, John was asked directly about the cord, about cord purchases, and acknowledged visiting a store where such items might have been sold. Lou Smith is asking John Ramsey, did you ever go in there? John Ramsey says, I've been there once that I can remember, maybe twice. I was looking for some camping stuff. And I think he's talking in terms of like a military store, like a military supply store. And he says, we needed some silverware to take, but I don't remember if I bought anything there or not. I might have gone in there with Burke or John Andrew. That was it. Lou Smith says, have you purchased any cord or duct tape or anything like that? John says, absolutely. And so while John denies a clear memory of purchasing such items or what have you, the context does kind of leave open the possibility of sort of this incidental exposure to rope or similar materials. And so this exchange adds ambiguity to his otherwise firm denial of recognizing the cord found on JonBenét. And this is the problem that we run into in this case. A denial, once you are shown a picture, there is a denial that you had anything to do with the picture. However, there is an admittance that you may have been in a place where that thing may have been. there's a further admittance of you may have been in a place where that thing is being sold with people in question, yourself included, that the cops are looking at. And so it's possible that you were in the store where this could be purchased with other people as witnesses who could see you purchase this. And this could have been laying around the house. It could have been picked up, could have been used. And this individual who used it had to have known where it was. And the thing about that is, this individual had to have taken the rest of the rope. The individual had to have left with something. We have to try to figure out where exactly this individual, what did they bring to the crime scene? Did they bring a backpack with rope in it? Did they bring a flashlight? What did they forget at the crime scene, and what were they able to keep? And so John is expressing, he's saying, well, I may have done it. And this is a consistent narrative in this case. John and Patsy Ramsey both will deny an action, but admit taking action in certain ways that could put them on the scene. My second point, the knot structure and implications of the skill level. We talked a little bit about that, but let's expand on that. The knot used on JonBenet's right wrist was identified by Bodhi Technology Group as a lark's head knot, also known as a cow hitch or a capsized reef knot, or more commonly, a square knot. This type of knot is widely recognized for its simplicity and is often taught to children in scouting programs or in beginner crafts. The fact that both ends were frayed and left unsealed supports the idea that the person tying the knot had only a surface level familiarity with rope work. Contrastingly, the cord removed from JonBenet's left wrist by John Ramsey was described as a Z noose with the standing part pulled through the center of the noose knot, which allowed the pulling together of the wrists. And this indicates a slightly higher understanding of knot mechanics, but it still does not reflect the consistency or professionalism seen in tactical or nautical restraint applications. John Ramsey, when questioned in 2001, distanced himself from any rope expertise, stating, "I'm really not familiar with knots. I should be, but I'm not. Yet, this is sort of complicated by other statements that he made, noting his interest in sailing and subscriptions to magazines like Sailing World." And he also mentioned that he may have picked up a yacht magazine or something to that effect. And so what's interesting is that this is a knot of simplicity that can be taught to children in scouting programs, or sort of like beginners arts and crafts. And so when we're thinking about putting a profile together of this individual does not absolutely have to be an expert. They could have just learned how to tie certain knots and repeated that over and over again as a matter of interest. I'm just going to put this little nugget here for you. In the interviews, Patsy Ramsey stated that not only, and John stated his interest quite plainly, almost might I say obsessively, with planes. I love planes. He said something to the effect of, "I love planes. I love to be around them. That's my hobby. That's really my only hobby. I've gotten into sailing a little bit. Fleet kind of pulled me into that. But really, my first love, my first hobby is planes. I love planes. Um, if you're familiar with the Ramsey house, then you're probably familiar with the fact that in Burke's room, his wallpaper is made up of planes, like little planes. Not only that, but as I was saying in an interview, Patsy Ramsey admitted to the fact that Burke liked watching videos of planes. And when asked by the investigator, do you mean like plane videos? Like, and she said they were videos, but because I think he had a TV in his room. And the investigator asked, "Are you talking about like, just like play videos or something like that? Nothing too important, right?" And Patsy responded, "Well, no, Burke likes to watch like legitimate, like, you know, plain videos. He likes to watch legitimate videos on training and how to get better at planes and all such as that and legitimate videos that you might watch if you were really trying to fly a plane." And she's stating this as a fact when Burke is 9, 10, or 11 years old. So in some case, we are aware that Burke can be quite uh, technical or drawn to very technical things. He watches these plain instructional videos and training videos that are not for children, they're actually for adults, so that he can learn more about planes, learn how to fly planes, and be just like his dad, with which there's nothing wrong with that. But it tells you about his capacity to digest information. Burke, I think Burke actually grew up, uh, got a little older, and learned how to fly planes himself. Is from my understanding. I could be wrong, but I think he actually grew up and learned how to fly planes himself. So I guess that's a little bit of the interesting part, though. But let's get back to the report. In his deposition, John elaborated, "Well, I used to sell. I got into it for a while and didn't really have a passion for it, but I like boats. I got Sailing World. I read it sometimes, but honestly, I didn't really know all the knots. I should have learned them. I know a bowline and maybe a square knot, but that's about it. I know a bowline and a square knot, but that's about it." Okay. The the Bodhi Technology Group said the knot, as far as we can identify it, it's like a head knot, also known as a cow hitch, a capsized reef knot, or more commonly, a square knot. Isn't that a coinky dink? The very knot and the only knot that you are familiar with, John, that you only know and you wish you could get better at other knots, but the only knot that you're familiar with, Bodhi Technology came back and said, "Well, that's the knot that's used on the wrist ligature." So one has to ask, seriously, if there are square knots on here and you, John Ramsey, came and tried to untie it, If the only kind of knot you know how to untie and tie and make is a square knot, wouldn't you be able to recognize how to maneuver this square knot right off the bat? It doesn't make sense. You know, I really want to believe you. I really do. I really do. But if I'm being honest, if I'm being honest, I never legitimately believed that this was tied around her wrists in a way that she couldn't escape. Because as John is saying that the ligatures around her wrist are tight, the autopsy is saying that they're loose. I don't have to make this stuff up. This is what the autopsy says. Tied loosely around the right wrist. Office of the Boulder County Coroner. Signed John E. Meyer. On 12/27 of 1996, pathologist. Dr. Meyer said they were tied loosely. You know who else was well aware that the cords were tied loosely? Mary T. Lacey in her office, District Attorney's Office, 20th Judicial District, Mary T. Lacey, District Attorney, November the 7th. You know who told Mary Lacey? The Bodie Technology Group. The same group that Mary Lacey wants us to believe helped her exonerate the Ramseys. Right. Okay. I'll bet they did. When I scroll down to, say, page 5, ligature from the wrist, composed of white color cord, olefin polypropylene, braided similar in size and construction to the the construction with the cord used in forming the garrote. When her father found JonBenet Ramsey, a ligature was attached to each of her wrists. Both ends of the wrist ligature were frayed. John Ramsey removed the ligature encircling his daughter's left wrist. He removed it. The ligature encircling JonBenet's right wrist was loosely tied. Both knots remain intact. The knot encircling the victim's right wrist was loosely tied over her long sleeve white pajamas. Distance between the two loops measured about 15.5 inches. If, help me understand this one. And I'll make it bigger just so I know you can see it. Help me understand this one. If the ligature on the right wrist was not only loose, but the knot encircling the victim's right wrist was tied loosely over her white pajamas, then wouldn't that mean you could just pull it off? Secondly, if it's tied loosely over her right wrist, maybe that would mean that you could move her wrist back and forth, and you could move the pajama sleeve back and forth, and maybe the knot being lightly tied over, you can sort of collapse her hand and pull her hand out of the wrist if it's tied that loosely. Because you seem to not have any problem. You maybe you didn't, maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like you ran into any problems untying one of these. And I would assume that you were able to get this one off because it's the bigger of the two. And so maybe this one was still um, tied around her wrist, and that's the one that you were having a problem with. But the problem with what you're saying, John, is that the pathologist and the forensic analysts both say that the cords were loose, while you tell us that it was too tight to untie. You didn't need to untie it. You just needed to pull it off. Because guess what? Guess what? Guess what? Guess what? Do these look untied to you? No, they don't. These cords or these knots are still intact. So that means that in order to help JonBenét and analyze and process her body, neither the pathologist, medical professional, or the Bodhi Technology Group analyst needed to untie this cord or what have you to remove this off JonBenét's wrist. And of course, obviously, the Bodhi Technology Group would have been receiving this secondhand. But Dr. Meyer just took it off and left this intact. What do you think about that? Because it was so tight. Yeah. Okay. But anyways, back to our report. The very thing that John is only aware to do, that's the knot that just so happens to show up on JonBenét's hand. Patsy gave contextual clues about the household's rope exposure. She said Burke had some ropes that he would play with, always trying to make a boat or something like that. In that picture yesterday, the rope was around the fort, or something. They were always up there nailing or attaching things. So we're starting to see this triangulation around sailing. A lot of talk around sailing. So what do we use? So we know that John got into sailing, and from sailing, he gave himself some more school, some more training. He learned how to tie a square knot. And that's the only thing he learned how to tie. I know a bowline and maybe a square knot. Those are the only two things that I'm doing. And the square knot is what ended up on JonBenét's wrists. And then Patsy says, yeah, Burke is maybe playing around with some ropes. Oh. Now, if the investigators start asking questions about your kids and the possibility of them doing something, and everything that you tell me could be used in the crime, don't you think maybe that's a little bit suspicious? While you're telling me to stop asking about certain things and going the wrong way, buddy, as Patsy said, going the wrong way. Not sure I am. I'm going the way that I need to be going. And that's the direction to solve this case. That's the way I'm going. I don't know what you're doing, but I'm telling you, after you told me, hey, I know how to tie a square knot. Okay, Bodhi Technology said it was a square knot. Now what? Did it have anything to do with the boat? No, I went in the store and maybe bought some stuff, and Burke was with me. Oh, so Burke would have known. So Burke would have known. So Burke would have known. He would have known where you kept. If he needed it, he would have known where you kept that stuff. And maybe, we'll just leave it right there. We won't assume anything. But he would have known if you bought it. But Burke himself had some ropes that he would play with, according to his mother. And so my take on this is this. When you look at this rope, this looks like somebody who just learned how to tie knots and is just enjoying the fact that they know how to tie a knot. Maybe we're talking about somebody who learned it in Boy Scouts, and I just throw Boy Scouts out there just because like that's the only like little program I know of that teaches you like skills at a very young age and stuff like that. When I was growing up, Boy Scouts were huge. I mean, we had a Boy Scouts, the whole campground. I think it was. We had a whole Boy Scouts campground, like right, like 5 minutes down the street from us. And I had some friends in Boy Scouts and stuff like that. Boy Scouts were huge, man. I wanted to be in Boy Scouts, man, because you know what? And the funny thing about it was, allow me to digress just for a little bit. The funny thing about it was there are all kinds of Boy Scout types of programs, and growing up, we went to this Christian camp, camp, and they had a kind of Boy Scout kind of deal because in Boy Scouts you have your shirt, you have a certain shirt that you wear, and then you get for different things, man. You get badges and prizes, and you can recite a verse like what we had to do. We had to recite a verse and you get a badge for that and stuff like that. And so you get pins for that, and you get you get this shoulder patch and this shoulder patch and all such as that. That's why I bring up Boy Scouts, because Boy Scouts really it used to encourage people to do better. From my experience, it used to encourage people to do better, or Boy Scout like programs. And so you learn a lot of things in Boy Scouts. And so basically, it could be somebody who's like, I learned something in Boy Scouts. I want to show you, I want to mimic this thing that I learned. And when I would, get something from Boy Scouts or what have you, I would be happy. I'd be, using that thing all over the place, showing my mom, showing my dad, and just be happy to, practicing it practicing on my brothers and stuff like that, and showing out to my family, and hey, look what I can do, kind of deal. Is that's what I'm saying. This is kind of the skill level a little bit that this reflects. So let's move on to part three: physical placement and functional use of the ligature. The physical layout of the ligature further undermines any suggestion of functional restraint. The autopsy notes that the cord was tied loosely over her long sleeve white pajamas, and the distance between the two loops measured about 15.5 inches. For a child who's 3 feet 9 inches and weighs 45 pounds, this span is wide enough to allow arm movement without restriction. This calls into question whether the ligature was ever intended to immobilize her. And we have to think about that. This intruder came in, and this is what I'm saying, guys. We have to really think critically about this. If the intruder came in and they were trying to commit inappropriate actions toward people, there's going to be a linear path. Ultimately, you're coming in there to get what you want. You're not coming in there to just piddle around and walk in the house and just see if you can scare somebody and run back out. That's not what this is for. Ultimately, at some point in time, you got to do your job. If like we would say, if like we might say, if you're at work, we might say, hey, do your job. So at some point in time, you got to get to work. And so basically, if you are the intruder, at some point in time, you got to intrude. If you're a kidnapper, at some point in time, you have to kidnap. You have to, you must. That's what you came here for. And so we would expect this person to get down to business and say, okay, look, I need to tie this girl up. She weighs 45 pounds. I need to actually restrict her. Let me get down. Let me make this rope. And I need to actually give something that restricts her, so that if I'm an intruder and I'm coming to commit this action and I am really into this as I say I am, then I need to um, get this cord tied around her, tighten her arms and her wrists up so she can't move or do anything. And then I need to start committing the action. But this person didn't tie the restraint. They didn't tighten the restraint. What in And that's what I'm saying. Come on. What intruder is doing that? Because it's like, if you're going to put a loose rope around her arms or around her wrists and not tighten it, why to allow her to move freely, even ligatures around her wrist that could fall right off, why bother? What's the point? It's kind of consistent, though I don't understand the connection. It's kind of consistent with maybe the Bloomies. The Bloomies probably can't stay up on JonBenet because they're too big. Maybe even the long johns that she was wearing. And now we're talking about a cord that may not have even stayed around her wrists, because the way the autopsy describes it, when Dr. Meyer found her, it was just on one wrist. So that means it probably, if it was on the other wrist, it probably fell off. It was so loose that it just fell off by itself. That means the kidnapper maybe untied it before he left. What? Who's doing that? So this was never intended to immobilize her, because it's not functionally set up to do that. This tells us that we're dealing with somebody who doesn't know how to be thorough. That's what this means. This individual is not thorough. They don't pay attention to detail, and maybe because they don't care, or they don't know every single detail of certain things. They're not in the mindset to have to worry about certain details. They're just in the mindset to get done what they want to get done, to accomplish what they want to accomplish. That's where they are. And so the image of the cord confirms the autopsy finding. The loops appear loose, and the longer tail is not tied to any anchor point. The larger loop is static, while the smaller loop has an excess cord, suggesting adjustability. So this is what we mean right here. You have adjustability here, and this looks more static, but you have some sort of level of adjustability here, is what that means. So the setup bears a resemblance to knots tied for demonstration or performance rather than practical use. I'm just showing you what I got here. This setup is further supported by Patsy Ramsey's reference to Burke and his friends always trying to make a boat or something like that, hinting at recreational rope use in the household. According to boating technology, the knot encircling the victim's right wrist was tied loosely over her long sleeve white pajamas. The distance between the two ropes measured 15.5 inches. This directly negates any theory of effective restraint. If anything, it suggests performance over function, and that emphasis is mine down here. So moving on to interviews, depositions, and contextual knowledge. So in interviews, both John and Patsy Ramsey repeatedly minimized their familiarity with the rope, with John stating, sort of John being asked, they asked, have you ever seen a cord like that before? And John is kind of saying something effective, well, like this, no, this looks kind of like a drawstring cord that you find in a coat jacket. Yet other references suggest a more embedded familiarity. John mentions friends who were deeply into camping and sailing. And Patsy acknowledges Burke had ropes he would play with the kids, always getting into things. Triangulation of the information from interviews, the physical cord, and the forensic report suggests that while the Ramseys distance themselves from ownership or recognition of the rope, its presence in the house is implausible. The rope resembles something commonly found in households with active children, particularly those involved in Boy Scouts or creative play. The context indicates familiarity with the rope, but not precision or expertise in handling it. So I know it, I see it, but I can do something with it, but it might not be good. And so there were some friends that Burke had. John recalled in one interview, they were really into camping, tents, ropes, gear. We'd go out with them sometimes. I can't remember their last name, but they were close with Burke, and I think they moved to Seattle later. He's talking about a guy named Woody and Bob that he said they moved up to Seattle. They would kind of all go camping together. And from what I thought, or what I understood when I read it, and I think this was the 98 interview, I thought it was a dad-son combo. And they all just kind of got together on that, different things like getting out in nature, hiking, and John and to be honest with you, John and Burke really, um they they, I, I would say they kind of had a good relationship. Um, and I say that because when you ask, um, sort of about the relationship between John and Burke, they list all these things. Oh man, we used to go camping, we used to hike, we used to all this and that, blah blah. But when you ask, okay, what about you and JonBenét? All it really is, well, JonBenét loved her daddy and things of that nature. Nothing really like, oh, we used to go on daddy daughter dates. I used to take her here, I used to take her there. Nothing really like that I can see from the transcripts. So that's really weird. But anyways, Patsy, when shown photographs of the ligature, responded, "This was found inside the house." She kind of asked the question. This was found inside the house, in John Andrews' room, maybe. Oh, maybe it was some rope he used for camping or something like that. I don't know. I just don't remember seeing this specifically, and I don't remember ever seeing a rope like that. So when she saw the rope, first of all, she said, "Hey, where'd you find this? You found this in my house?" Well, yeah, Patsy, because you were there hugging your daughter with a rope around her. Do you remember? Maybe you don't, but here, let me remind you. Let me refresh your memory. Your daughter had a rope around her wrists and around her body in her head region. And so at some point in time, you guys got to know something. But if you don't, I'm here to tell you. But Patsy's response was, "Oh, that could be something that John Andrew had. It could be something, one of his things that maybe he used for camping." Oh, okay. So John admitted to going out camping and moving around with friends with Burke. And then Patsy said, "Oh yeah, could have been the fact that John Andrew also did some camping with some rope as well." We tie it back to the military store where John said, "Oh, I might have gone in the military store with both Burke and John Andrew." Now, that would make sense because if John is trying to be an all-American dad and he's trying to show his kids what he's learned and what he knows, then guess what? John is going to say, "Hey boys, let's go." John, having a sort of a split family, kids living in two households, he's happy that his oldest son goes to Boulder, Colorado, so that way he can be close to his son and his son can come over whenever. And his oldest son can see how happy his dad is and how well his dad, "Oh, even though things didn't work out with me and your mother, I want you to know how happy we are and how much of a good life I can provide for you. Oh, you're interested in camping? Let's go do the son dad thing and we'll bring your little brother and we'll all so you can see, so your little brother can look up to you as a role model, and then you can see, he can see what it's like to have an older brother. You can kind of interact with your younger brother, and we can all just kind of make a guy's trip out of this, day to this trip to the military store, and we can look at camping stuff. We're all interested in camping. That's really what this seems like. And so we are able to pinpoint now. John said, "Okay, maybe I went in there with both of my sons." So we got all of y'all having something to do with some rope. More specifically, centered around camping or sailing. And somebody somewhere along the way got some knowledge on how to tie a rope. Specifically, and you mentioned in 1998 or in 2000, one of the two. "Hey, this is the only kind of rope I know how to tie." Great. In 2007, they said that's the rope that's on here. Would you look at that? It's going to be consistent. So let's get ready to close this thing down. This cord does not bear the marks of, let's remind ourselves of some things. This cord does not bear the mark of professional restraint or criminal precision. Let's just be honest about that. It looks more like someone who is demonstrating a new skill and, "Hey, look at me. Look what I can do." The most functional aspect of this ligature seems to be symbolic, trying to mimic somebody trying to make you believe that there is a restraint here. But once you get up on it, once you get close, and once you get to pulling and tugging at it, you're like, "Hey, this is not really real. This is not really on there for certain. I can just move it off." So there's no way, if we're talking about this, that this is something that was used in a way that could have restrained JonBenet, that if this was used on her, while she was alive, the restraint is too loose for her wrists. It would have fallen off. The restraint is too wide. And so it wouldn't have restricted her. So it would have fallen off. It's too loose, too loose. JonBenét wouldn't have been, she wouldn't have had any problem with this. So if you're telling me, John, that she would have screamed bloody murder, how would she know she's in trouble with loose cords around her wrist? They're not threatening her. This cord wouldn't be too tight if those cords were on her wrist before she died. That's what makes me question you. And so the repeated statements by both John and Patsy Ramsey distancing themselves from the cord and its style only raise more questions. Their vague familiarity with rope, sailing, and camping suggests that while they may not have used this exact cord, it was certainly within their household orbit, something that you could have used, something that you could have had. If nothing else, the inconsistencies and simplicity in the cord's construction suggest some sort of domestic source, probably even um, maybe a juvenile one. So to close this out, the wrist ligature in JonBenet, in the JonBenet Ramsey case, tells us um, more through its lack of function than through any act of restraint. Its loose knotting, frayed ends, and overlong tail suggest that it was not used to bind but to perform. It's sloppily made. It's not useful. It's the materials and the knot style indicate low skill or beginner level familiarity with rope, pointing more towards something symbolic than any serious use of this cord or professional effort. When we cross reference the physical evidence with interviews from John and Patsy Ramsey, a pattern of plausible denial emerges. Neither will admit to knowledge of the cord or its use, but they both acknowledge, yeah, we've had some cords in our home. We've definitely bought cords, and we kind of know how to tie some knots, and we've been in some positions to tie some knots. I've taken some courses or some training on some tying knots, and my son has taken some courses and training on being a Boy Scout and all such as that. So yeah, I mean, we're kind of in that range. But in terms of this, we have nothing to do with this. We have nothing to do with any of it. But your skill set matches according to what you say. And that's what I find fishy. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks again, CME, for contributing to the channel through comments and monetarily. I appreciate you so, so, so much. Thank you once again. And until next time, take care of yourself and take it easy.